They told me they were just going for a walk, that they'd be back in half an hour. But the snow kept falling, and no one came. My fingers went numb, my shoes soaked through. And when I finally made it home, the door I paid for was locked. My name is Teresa Moretti. I was born in a quiet village near Lake Como, with olive groves for neighbors and a sky that turned peach every evening. I never thought my life would end up like this, wrapped in a wet shawl on a stone bench outside the villa I gave to my son, abandoned like a stray no one wanted to claim. But let me start from the beginning, when my heart was still open, and my sacrifices were given freely. I was 78 the winter it happened. My knees ached more than usual, and my hands had lost the strength to knead pasta dough like I used to. But my heart, it still beat fiercely for my family. Especially for Marco, my only son, and Julia, his glamorous wife. I'd lived with them for 3 years, ever since I sold my tiny flat in the old town to help them buy their dream home. A beautiful villa on the outskirts of Milan. Wide arches, terracotta roof, ivy curling up the walls. It was supposed to be our home, all of us together. I gave them 280,000 euros. Every cent I had from selling the flat and my late husband's pension savings. No contracts, no fuss. Family doesn't need paperwork, Marco had said with a smile that still warms and haunts me. I believed him. The first year was lovely. They let me set up a small garden patch in the back. Julia even helped me plant rosemary and sage. I cooked, cleaned, and watched over my granddaughter, little Bianca, when they were busy with work. She would tug on my skirt and giggle, "Na, raccontami una storia." Tell me a story. Oh, how I miss her laugh. But something shifted after that first year. Subtle things at first. My food was too salty. My stories too long. Julia started locking the wine cabinet and hiding snacks. Marco, once so affectionate, barely spoke to me unless he needed a favor. Bianca wasn't allowed to nap in my room anymore. I began to feel like a guest, a burden, even. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself families go through phases. That love doesn't need to be returned right away. I just needed to be patient. After all, they were young, busy, stressed with life. Maybe I was too sensitive. Then Christmas came. I'd knit matching scarves for everyone. Deep burgundy, their favorite color. I spent days making sure each stitch was perfect. On Christmas morning, I placed the box under the tree. But when we gathered to exchange gifts, there was nothing for me. Not even a card. Julia laughed it off, saying, "Oh, Teresa, your family. We all share everything, no need for presents." I smiled, but something broke that day. It was late January when the snow started to fall. I remember looking out the window, watching white flakes settle over the garden I once tended with love. That morning, Marco came into the kitchen with his usual rush. "Put on something warm, Mama," he said. "We're taking Bianca to the park for snow pictures." I reached for my thick shawl and clutched the small bag I always carried. Tissues, rosary, some euros in case I needed them. Julia didn't speak to me directly, but when I got in the car, she sighed loudly and muttered something under her breath. We drove for about 15 minutes before they stopped near an old stone path by the river. "There's a bench here," Marco said. "Why don't you wait while we walk a bit with Bianca?" I hesitated. "It's cold, Marco." He didn't look at me. "It'll just be 30 minutes. They walked off with the child I loved like my own, their boots crunching into the distance. I sat down and waited. And waited. Snowflakes melted into my skirt. My fingers turned stiff. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. I finally stood, slowly, and made my way back toward the main road. There was no sign of them. No car. No phone call. I walked nearly an hour, legs trembling, coat soaked, until I reached the house. When I rang the bell, no one answered. The door I'd once unlocked with pride stayed shut. I knocked. Once. Twice. Then I saw it, Through the side window, Julia's silhouette, moving quickly. I shouted her name. She paused, looked toward the window, and turned off the lights. I stood there in silence, snow soaking my hair, my heart thudding like thunder in my chest. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually the neighbor, sweet old Signora Bianchi, found me and brought me inside her warm kitchen. "You're shaking, Teresa," she said, wrapping a blanket around me. "Dio mio, what happened?" I couldn't speak. My voice was gone. My dignity, too. The next morning, Marco texted me. "Sorry, things have been tense. Julia needs space. Maybe stay with friends for a while?" No apology. No explanation. No mention of where they'd gone or why they left me. I stared at that message for an hour, tears falling silently down my cheeks. My friend Carmela, widowed like me but sharper than ever, was the one who found me staring at that screen and said something that shook me. "They're not confused, Teresa. They're cruel. And you've let them treat you like this for too long." That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not rage. Not revenge. Clarity. I had given everything. My home, my time, my love, and in return, they gave me silence and snow. But I wasn't going to end my life in shame and shadows. No. They didn't know who they'd just locked out. The first night I stayed with Carmela, I didn't sleep. I lay on the small pull-out bed in her guest room, the one she used to keep for her grandson before he moved away. The walls smelled of lavender, and the ticking clock on her dresser kept me company. I stared at the ceiling for hours, reliving every little moment from the past 3 years. The way Marco once kissed my forehead when I made his favorite gnocchi. The way Julia used to thank me for taking care of Bianca. Was any of it real? By sunrise, I had my answer. No. It was convenience dressed as affection. Gratitude used as currency. Carmela tapped gently on the door around 7. She held a tray with a cup of hot milk and biscotti. "Eat something, cara mia," she said softly. I tried. I really did. But the moment I took a sip, my throat closed. The grief sat like a stone in my chest. Carmela watched me for a moment, then pulled up a chair and reached into the pocket of her robe. "I've been quiet about this for too long," she said. "But your son, Teresa, I never liked how he treated you. And Julia? That one's colder than snow." I blinked at her. "You knew." "Not everything," she said. "But I've seen how they speak to you. The way they'd look the other way when you limped or coughed. The whispers when you left the room. And I've heard things, too, from my niece who works at the pharmacy." I sat up straighter. "What things?" She hesitated. "Julia's been asking about property laws. About rights for co-owners, especially in cases involving elders." My blood ran cold. "You think they're planning to make sure I have no claim?" "I don't think, Teresa. I know." It was then Carmela handed me a small business card. "Talk to her," she said. "Her name is Claudia Ferry. A lawyer. Smart. Discreet. And not afraid of snakes in suits." For the next hour, I stared at that card like it held the key to my entire life. Because maybe it did. 3 days later, I found myself in Claudia's warm, minimalist office in Milan. She looked young, maybe in her early 40s, but she had sharp eyes and sharper instincts. After I told her my story, she didn't sigh or blink in pity. She just nodded and began writing. "So you gave them the money from your flat? No written agreement?" "No. Marco said we didn't need one. That family doesn't need paperwork," she finished, like she'd heard it 1,000 times. Classic. My fingers fidgeted in my lap. "Does that mean I have no rights?" Claudia leaned back and laced her fingers. "Not necessarily. If the house was purchased with your funds, even if it's under their name, there are ways. Tracing transactions. Witness testimonies. We'll need to dig. Quietly." Something sparked inside me. Hope. Anger? Maybe both. What if I want to protect what's left? And make sure they can't do this to me again? Claudia nodded. Then we start gathering everything. Bank records. Any texts. Receipts. Witnesses. And we look into the property deed. I'll request an investigator to pull public documents. And what about Bianca? I whispered. They're raising her to think this is love. Claudia's expression softened. Then perhaps you being strong is the best example you can give her. The weeks that followed were a blur of appointments, quiet tears, and slow rebuilding. I stayed with Carmela. I cooked occasionally, read books, watered her plants. Some days I woke up angry. Some days I was numb. And on one strange, beautiful day, I felt proud. Because Claudia called with news. We found the paper trail, she said. Your deposit was the majority portion for the down payment. Your bank record and transfer logs are clear. Technically, you were a financial contributor, and under Italian law, you could claim a constructive trust, especially if we prove they misled or exploited you. I sat down hard. I can fight this? Oh yes, she said. And not just for your portion. If we find evidence of malice, say, texts where they dismissed you or planned to oust you, we can claim emotional harm and elder abuse. The words felt heavy. Elder abuse. I'd never thought of myself that way. As a victim. But now it made sense. They didn't hit me. They didn't scream. But they locked the door. They left me in the snow. They vanished when I needed them most. That's abuse. It took time. Weeks passed. Then months. During that time, Marco never reached out. Not a single message. Not even to ask if I was alive. I heard from neighbors that they told people I'd moved to be closer to friends. Julia even posted on Instagram a photo of the fireplace, Bianca in front of it, wrapped in a new scarf that I hadn't knit. Caption: finally some peace and privacy. Just the three of us, two hearts. I stared at it for a long time. Just the three of us. Like I'd never existed. Claudia was right. They were cruel. By mid-spring, the investigator Claudia hired uncovered something else. The villa, though registered under Marco and Julia, was purchased under a structure that still listed me as a co-financier. Legally, they were walking on thin ice. We can send them a notice, Claudia said, or we can wait and gather more. Your choice. I chose to wait. Because I wasn't done watching. A week later, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. Hi Nana. It's Bianca. I found your old letter in my bookshelf. I miss you. Why don't you live with us anymore? Tears blurred my vision. I clutched my chest. She remembered. I didn't reply right away. I needed to be sure it wasn't sent by Julia to bait me. But deep down, I knew that voice. That spelling. That heart. I printed the message and handed it to Claudia. This, I said, is the only part of that house worth fighting for. It was time to act. I gave Claudia the green light. We filed a formal petition demanding acknowledgement of my financial contribution, rights to reclaim my share, and damages for emotional neglect. The claim was civil, clean, direct, and painfully clear. Within 72 hours of receiving the notice, Marco finally called. Mama, this is all a misunderstanding. You don't need to go this far. We were just giving you space. I cut him off. I gave you everything. And you gave me silence and a locked door. His voice cracked. Julia said you were unstable. That you left on your own. Do not lie to me, Marco. He fell quiet. Then softly, can we talk? Please. In person? I hung up. Because I was done talking. Let the court listen now. Let the law speak where blood had failed. There's a certain silence you carry when your heart has been broken not by strangers, but by your own blood. It isn't loud like grief. It's quiet. Heavy. A silence that folds into your spine, that teaches you to stop expecting kindness where it's never returned. But there's also a strength in it. A strength I didn't know I had. Not until the day I walked into the Milan Civil Courthouse. Claudia met me outside the building. She wore her long black coat, hair tucked behind her ears, eyes focused like she was ready for war. "They've sent their reply," she told me calmly as we stood at the marble steps. "They're denying your emotional distress, but they did acknowledge your financial contribution, with one key lie." "What lie?" "They claim it was a gift, not a contribution." A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course. In their eyes, I was just an old woman with a heart too soft to keep her bank account safe. A fool in a shawl. But not anymore. Claudia placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Let's remind them who you are." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Not the dramatic echoing chamber you see in movies. No long oak benches or shouting barristers. Just clean lines, pale walls, and a judge seated behind a desk that seemed too simple for the decisions it held. Marco sat to my left with Julia, her makeup perfectly done, lips tight with contempt. She looked at me like I was a roach beneath her heel. I wore my nicest coat. Not expensive, but clean, dignified. I held my rosary in one hand, not to pray, but to remember who I was. The judge asked if we wanted to try mediation first. Julia leaned forward and smiled. "We would love to reconcile. Teresa can come home. We're willing to forgive the legal threats if she drops the case." "She just misunderstood." Claudia stood before I could. "Your Honor, my client was left alone in sub-zero temperatures. Her funds were used to purchase property in which she was denied not only ownership but shelter. Forgiveness isn't theirs to grant. Dignity is not a gift you give and take." The judge nodded. And so, it began. The hearing wasn't long, but it was devastating. They tried to twist everything. Claimed I was forgetful. That I wandered away. That they tried to care for me but I refused to be helped. They even said I had mood swings, that Julia was afraid to leave Bianca alone with me. That I yelled. That I slammed doors. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Marco, my boy, just sat there. Letting her speak for both of them. Letting her drag my name through dirt he knew wasn't true. When it was my turn, Claudia handed me a paper. But I didn't read from it. I stood, took a breath, and let the silence settle. Then I said, "Your Honor, I once sold the only home I'd ever owned to help my son buy his dream. I moved in thinking I'd be embraced. I cooked, cleaned, cared for my granddaughter while they worked late. I gave love, time, money. I even gave them my peace. But the day they left me in the snow, that day, I stopped being family and became their burden. I felt my hands shake, but my voice did not. I don't want their apologies. I want justice. For the years they took. For the warmth they denied. For the child I haven't hugged in nearly 5 months." The room was quiet. Even Julia didn't blink. The judge nodded slowly and recessed for deliberation. We stepped outside into the courtyard. The air was cool. Spring was coming. You could smell it in the wind. Claudia turned to me with a rare softness. "You did well." "I told the truth," I said simply. "It's all I had left." She handed me a small envelope. "From Bianca." I froze. She mailed it to my office. Somehow, she got the address. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, on a piece of pink notebook paper, written in messy child's handwriting. "Dear Nana, I found your scarf under my bed. It smells like your soap. I sleep with it now. Mommy says you left because you were sad. Are you still sad? I miss you every day. When I grow up, I'll have a house and you can live in it forever. Love. Bianca." 2 hearts. I had to sit down. Right there on the stone bench outside the courthouse, I cried into my hands. Not out of pain, but because that tiny letter did more to heal me than anything else in the world. Love. Real love. still existed, even if her mother had buried it deep. 2 weeks later, the judge delivered his verdict. The house deed would be updated. My financial contribution acknowledged. Formally and legally. I was entitled to reclaim my portion, or they would be required to buy me out within 90 days. Additionally, the court issued a warning to Julia and Marco regarding elder mistreatment. It wasn't criminal, but it was a stain on their record. When Marco heard the decision, he called me again. "Please," he said, "don't make this worse than it is." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into a notary's office and signed the papers to reclaim my share. 280,000 euros. Returned with interest. I used the money to buy a small apartment just 2 streets from Carmela. Quiet. With a little balcony that catches the afternoon sun. I hung Bianca's letter on the fridge. And every morning, I water my plants and speak aloud. "Nana is waiting. But only if you're worth the wait." 2 months had passed since the court decision, and I had not heard another word from Marco or Julia. Not a call. Not a text. Not even an empty "How are you?" forwarded by someone else. The silence had once made me weep. Now it gave me peace. I spent my days arranging my small new home, slowly rebuilding a life that felt mine. There was a lavender curtain on my kitchen window now, and a worn but charming rocking chair I found in a street market. I bought it for 15 euros, and it creaked exactly the way my old one used to when Marco was a baby. The memory didn't sting anymore. It felt like a story, distant, complete, and no longer alive. Carmela visited often. She'd bring lemon cake, and we'd sit and talk like girls again, laughing over the absurdities of life and the boldness of starting over at nearly 80. Then, one morning, something shifted. It was a Sunday. The church bells rang across the neighborhood like they always did, echoing gently between the old buildings. I had just taken my tea to the little balcony when there was a knock on my door. A hesitant one. I opened it slowly. Marco stood there. Unshaven. Eyes hollow. Suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. I barely recognized him. "Can I come in?" he asked. I didn't move. I didn't speak. So he kept talking. "I don't expect anything," he said quickly. I wanted to explain. "Julia," she said, "it was best to keep distance. That you were fragile, and we needed space to handle things our way." I believed her. "But then the court, and the photos, and the letter from Bianca that you framed." His voice cracked. "I saw a picture of it. On your fridge. A friend of yours posted it when she helped you move in." I folded my arms, silent. He took a deep breath. "Mama." I didn't mean for it to go that far. I thought it would just be a short break. I didn't know Julia planned to shut the door on you. Now I laughed. Quietly. Sadly. "Short break," I said. "You left me in the snow, Marco." He looked down. "I know. I gave you my life. My savings. My trust. I watched your child, cleaned your dishes, kept your house, and you let her turn you against me with nothing but lies and silence." He didn't try to argue. Just nodded, eyes rimmed with red. "I miss you," he whispered. "You miss the version of me that never asked for anything back." His head snapped up. I saw the truth sting in his face. "I miss your love," he said, more honest this time. "Your voice in the morning. Your prayers at night. Even your judgment when I forgot to put the seat down." That almost made me smile. Almost. But I stayed still. "You married a woman who sees kindness as weakness. And you let her make you cruel by pretending it was loyalty. I lost you the day you chose silence." He took a step closer. "Can we start again? Please. Bianca, she asks about you." At the sound of her name, my heart wavered. "Does she know what you did?" He blinked. "She knows something happened. She thinks you're mad at us." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm awake." We stood there, mother and son, in a quiet that was now fuller than words. Then I pointed to the photo frame behind me, Bianca's pink letter still pinned inside. You want to start again? Tell her the truth first. And then maybe, I'll think about it. He nodded slowly and left. A week later, another knock. But this one came with laughter. Light, high-pitched, familiar. Nonnea. I opened the door just as Bianca flung her arms around my waist. She had grown taller, her curls longer, her face older somehow, but her hug? Her hug was the same. Behind her, a young woman stood. I recognized her, one of Julia's cousins, Lucia, the kind one who'd once given me a birthday card when everyone else had forgotten. She asked to see you, Lucia said. Julia didn't want her to, but Marco said it was time. Bianca looked up at me with wide eyes. Daddy told me you were hurt. That you cried. That they were wrong. I kneeled, slowly, aching joints be damned. I was hurt, Piccolina. But seeing you now, it's healing me. She reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue. It was the burgundy scarf I had knit her years ago. I found it in our storage room. Mommy said it was too old. But I think it still smells like you. I wrapped it around her shoulders and pulled her close. We didn't need to speak for a while. Just breathe. Just be. Later, we sat at the small round table in my kitchen. I made warm milk with cinnamon. Her favorite. We played dominoes. She beat me twice. Lucia watched us from the corner, smiling but quiet. Before they left, Bianca turned to me. Can I visit again? Maybe every week? I hesitated, then nodded. Yes, amore mio. But only if you promise to always ask questions when something feels wrong. Even if grown-ups tell you not to. She nodded solemnly. And just like that, the first thread of something new was sewn. Not a repair of what was, but a new beginning. I stood by the door after they left, feeling something in my chest open like a window in spring. And then I whispered to myself, forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing to be free. They still had to earn their place back in my life. Piece by piece. Truth by truth. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for love to find me. I was walking toward it on my own terms. A strange thing happens when your world falls apart. You stop being afraid of starting over. That fear that once wrapped itself around my bones like the cold outside the villa, it melted away the moment I realized I'd survived it. Not just the betrayal, but the loneliness, the humiliation, the silence. And now, I was discovering something I never expected at 78. Freedom. Not the kind they talk about in books or poetry. I mean the small, quiet kind. The kind where you wake up and decide what tea to drink without worrying someone will mock you. The kind where your home smells like what you like. Lavender soap and freshly ironed linens. The kind where you can cry if you want to, and no one will ask you to be less emotional. It was late April when I truly understood that I was not waiting for Marco or Julia to come crawling back with apologies wrapped in empty words. I was done holding out for their change. But Bianca? She kept visiting. Every Sunday. She'd walk up the steps with Lucia or sometimes Marco, who waited in the car unless I invited him up, and she'd bring me her drawings, school stories, and little notes like, "Today I planted a flower in school. I named it Teresa like you." Or, "I told my teacher about your gnocchi. She asked for the recipe. Can I have it?" One Sunday, she brought me a tiny potted rosemary plant. "This is for your balcony garden," she said. "I remember you used to grow it." I ran my fingers through the soft leaves. The scent was strong. Familiar. Like home. I didn't say anything, but I kissed her forehead and blinked away tears she didn't see. She was my anchor now. My reason for choosing hope again. Around the same time, Claudia called with a final update. "They've completed the transfer of funds," she said. "With interest. It's official. You're fully repaid, and Julia's legal team requested to close the case permanently with no future contact. Unless you initiate. Perfect, I said. Claudia paused. Are you sure you're okay with that? I thought for a moment. Yes, I replied. Some people mistake peace for reunion. I don't. Peace is what happens when you finally stop giving your power away. She smiled. You should write a book. Maybe I will, I laughed. But I'd rather knit one. That weekend, Carmela and I sat on my balcony, sipping mint tea and watching the sun fade into the hills. She glanced at me. You know what I admire most about you, Teresa? My stubbornness? I joked. She grinned. No. Your softness. It survived. I looked at her confused. Most people become cold after betrayal. But not you. You found warmth again. Even in the ruins. Her words settled into me like a warm coat. Maybe she was right. Maybe survival isn't about becoming tougher, but about keeping your tenderness, even when the world tells you to bury it. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Marco. Not to Julia. To Bianca. My dearest Bianca, I'm writing this because one day you'll be old enough to understand everything that happened. The silence, the snow, the hurt. And I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. Sometimes grown-ups get lost in their own storms. Sometimes they make choices they can't undo. But love is like rosemary. You can forget to water it, neglect it, even leave it in the cold. But if it had strong roots, it grows back. You are my rosemary, and I will always be here for you. When you're older, if you ever wonder what strength looks like, look in the mirror. Because it's in your blood. Love always. Nana. 2 hearts. I sealed the letter and tucked it away in a drawer for a future day. One when questions might come, and I won't be there to answer them in person. Because my time on this earth is shorter now. I feel it. The creaks in my bones. The quiet fatigue. The way night falls faster than it used to. But I no longer fear what's ahead. Not because I've forgotten the betrayal, but because I rose from it and made a life of my own choosing. 2 days later, there was a knock on the door. Not Bianca. Not Marco. Julia. I opened it and stared. She was dressed in designer shoes and a trench coat too thin for the breeze. Her hair was sleek, lipstick perfect. But her eyes? They were lost. May I come in? She asked. I didn't step aside. What do you want? To talk. I don't think there's anything left to say. I know what I did, she said quickly. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. But I need you to know. Marco didn't leave you in the snow. I did. I said nothing. He went to get the car. I told him you were going to stay with Carmela. That you'd planned it. I made it seem like it was your idea. And he believed you? She looked down. He always believes me. Even now. She hesitated. Not anymore. I exhaled. That's not love, Julia. That's control. I know. She stepped back. I'm leaving. For a while. To stay with my sister. We're separated. Marco. He's not the same. I ruined too much. I just wanted you to know the truth before I go. Why? I asked softly. She didn't answer. Just looked at me with those lost, tired eyes. Because I was raised by a woman who told me control was power. But you won by letting go. Then she turned and walked away. And I didn't stop her. Not because I hated her, but because I no longer needed her to understand me. I understood myself now. When summer came, I was no longer the woman trembling in a stranger's guest room, soaked to the bone by betrayal and snow. I was no longer the woman waiting by the door for apologies that never came. I had become something else entirely. Not harder. Not colder. Just clearer. And free. My apartment was now fully my own. I had painted the kitchen walls pale yellow, like sunlight, and placed wind chimes by the open balcony doors. Each breeze was a song. Each morning, I woke with a rhythm. Tea. A bit of gardening. Letters. Quiet meals. Walks with Carmela. And Bianca. Oh, Bianca. She remained my Sunday joy. She no longer came with Lucia. She came alone. 12 years old now, smart as a whip, and with a face that slowly grew to resemble mine more than her mother's. She started calling me on her own, sending voice notes filled with little updates about school and friends, asking me about my recipes, our family tree, our roots. One Sunday, she arrived with a school assignment, a family history project. "I want to do it about you," she said, opening her notebook. "Everyone's doing theirs on their parents, but you've lived through wars, love, Italy before all the cars." I chuckled. Yes, and before the internet. Can you imagine? We sat on the floor, paper spread around us, old black and white photos in hand. There was my wedding portrait, me in lace gloves and a trembling smile. My husband, Enzo, tall and gentle-eyed. There was baby Marco, pudgy-cheeked and wrapped in hand-stitched blankets. "You were beautiful, Nana," she said softly, tracing my photo with her finger. "I still am," I teased. She grinned. "Yes. But here, you looked like a queen." I smiled. I felt like one. That night, after Bianca left, I walked onto the balcony and looked at the rosemary bush she had given me months ago. It had bloomed. Strong, fragrant, stubborn. Like us. Suddenly, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Peace. And then came the letter. A handwritten envelope. No return address. I opened it cautiously. It was from Marco. "Mama, I know you may never forgive me. And maybe I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I see it all now. The truth Julia finally told me. The lies I helped feed. The door I let close. I watched you get smaller and smaller in our lives, until I convinced myself you wanted it that way. I've been going to therapy." Bianca encouraged it. "She told me you said that strength isn't about being right, but being honest. So here I am, honestly broken. I miss you. Not because you were useful or because you cooked or cleaned, but because I remember who I was when I was your son. A better man. I want to be him again. If you ever want to talk, I'll be waiting. Your son." Marco. I sat at the table for a long time with that letter in my hands. My heart didn't leap. It didn't crumble. It just listened. I poured myself a glass of water and lit a candle. Then I wrote back. "Marco, I am proud of you. Not for being broken, but for being willing to admit you were. You don't need to become the man you were. That version of you left me in the cold. But you can become better than him. If you do, you won't need my forgiveness. You'll already have your own. This door? It won't open just because you knock. It will open when trust returns, step by step. And when it does, it won't be for your comfort. It will be for the child you once were, the one who danced in my kitchen barefoot and laughed like thunder. Tell Bianca I love her. That never changed. And tell yourself that too." Mama. I sealed the envelope and placed it in the mailbox the next morning. That Sunday, Bianca arrived with a little cake she had baked herself. Lemon and almond. We sat in the kitchen and she set 2 plates, carefully slicing it with the seriousness of a grown-up chef. "I have something to tell you," she said, mouthful of cake. "Daddy said he cried when he got your letter." "Oh, yeah." "He said you forgave him without saying the word. That it was worse and better than hearing it." I nodded. "Forgiveness isn't a word," I said. "It's a door you keep locked until you're sure the person on the other side knows why it was ever closed." She thought about that a moment. "You'll open it one day, right?" I looked into her eyes, those wide, honest, sea-glass eyes. "For you always." She smiled and passed me another slice. Later that week, I started volunteering at a local community garden for seniors. There were women like me, and others who'd lost more: partners, children, homes. We didn't talk much. Just tilled the soil, trimmed back vines, watered things with gentleness we no longer gave to people. One woman, Ines, told me quietly one afternoon, "I buried 2 husbands." But betrayal? That was worse. At least death doesn't make you question if you were ever loved. I understood. We didn't need to say more. That summer, I hosted my first small dinner. Just Carmela, Bianca, and 2 new friends from the garden. I cooked risotto with saffron, poured sweet red wine, and played old songs on the radio. At one point, Bianca stood up and raised her glass. "To Nonna Teresa," she said, "who knows how to grow a garden from ashes." They all clinked their glasses with smiles. But me? I cried. Because for the first time in a very, very long time, I wasn't a guest in my own life. I was home. The morning of my 79th birthday arrived quietly. No trumpets. No family rushing in with balloons or elaborate cakes. Just the gentle sun pouring through the window, warming the olive wood floors I'd grown to love beneath my bare feet. I dressed slowly, a soft green skirt, my cream-colored blouse with a little embroidery at the sleeves. It was the blouse Enzo once said made me look like spring. I tied my silver hair in a loose bun and pinned the brooch Bianca had given me at Christmas. A tiny golden butterfly. She told me it reminded her of how I never stayed small. That day, I had no plans for a party. No expectations. But life, like a good story, still had one more turn. Around 11 a.m. there was a knock at my door. A slow, deliberate knock. I opened it to find Marco. No bouquet. No gift bag. Just him. In a pressed white shirt, holding a paper bag from the bakery down the street. "I didn't bring a cake," he said. "I thought maybe we could make one together. Like we used to." I didn't speak. Not yet. "I've been trying," he continued, stepping back slightly, giving me space. "Therapy. Writing letters. I even started visiting Papa's grave again. I needed to remember who I used to be. Before I stopped being your son." I studied him. Not the shirt, not the bag, him. He wasn't the same man who sat silent beside Julia in that courtroom. There was a softness again. An unpolished humility. I could tell by the way he avoided my eyes. Not from shame, but from respect. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. We didn't bake right away. We sat at the table, and I poured us both tea, no sugar, just like Enzo used to drink it. Marco looked around my home like he was seeing me for the first time. The crochet doilies, the shelf of prayer candles, Bianca's drawings on the wall. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's mine," I replied simply. He nodded. After a long pause, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small, red leather notebook. "I've been writing in this," he said, placing it on the table between us. "Letters. Thoughts. Memories. I wrote one to you. Would you like me to read it?" I hesitated, then nodded. He opened to a folded page and cleared his throat. "Dear Mama, I remember the way your hands smelled of flour. The way your voice softened when you sang me lullabies, even after I was too old to admit I liked them. I remember how you never missed a soccer match, even if it meant standing in the rain. I don't know when I stopped seeing you as my compass. Maybe when I got too full of myself. Maybe when I married someone who wanted to trim the parts of me that were made from you. I let you become invisible. And then, unforgivably, I let you become disposable. I don't expect to be your son again today. But maybe one day I could be your friend. Happy birthday." Marco, I reached out and touched the page. The ink had smudged in one place. Perhaps from his tears. Or maybe mine. "I don't need a perfect son," I said softly. "I need a man who tells the truth." He looked up at me, hopeful. I stood and walked to the kitchen drawer, pulling out a small white box tied with green string. I handed it to him. He frowned, opening it carefully. Inside was a photo. A copy of an old picture of us. Me holding baby Marco in front of our first home, sunlight on our faces. I kept it, I said, because I needed to remember the version of you I once loved. He stared at the photo for a long time. I want to earn my way back, he whispered. Then start by showing Bianca what it means to rebuild. He nodded slowly. I will. Later, we baked the cake together. Just like we used to. He cracked the eggs with the same clumsy hands. He spilled flour and apologized 3 times. When it was in the oven, we sat on the balcony, sipping tea as the smell of vanilla filled the apartment. He didn't try to stay too long. He didn't overreach. Just before leaving, he turned to me. I hope this is the first of many Sundays. I looked at him, then at the door. This door opens with kindness now. Not blood. He smiled, nodded, and stepped out. I closed it behind him. Not with finality, but with control. My control. The next week, I went with Bianca to a book fair. She wandered through the stalls, picking up poetry collections and used children's novels. Then she held one up and turned to me. Do you think you'd ever write one? A book. Yeah. Your life. Everything you've been through. I think people need to hear it. I chuckled. Why? Because some people think that once you're old, your story is over. But yours keeps going. And you're not scared to tell it. I looked down at the worn notebook in my bag, the one I'd started filling ever since the trial ended. Not with bitterness, but with beginnings. I'll think about it, I said, squeezing her hand. And I meant it. The final surprise came on a quiet Thursday morning. A letter in the mail. From Julia. Not handwritten. Typed. Short. Neat. Teresa, I've signed the divorce papers. Marco deserves peace. Bianca deserves a future that includes both of you. I don't know who I am without control. But I'm going to try and find out. You were never weak. I just feared what your strength revealed about me. I won't contact you again. But thank you for teaching me the price of cruelty and the cost of dignity. Julia, I folded the letter and burned it in my sink. Not out of anger. Out of closure. I watched the flame flicker, curl the edges of the paper, and then turn it to ash. Then I washed the sink, dried my hands, and went to water the rosemary. Because that's what you do when your story has been scorched. You grow it back. Root by root. Petal by petal. Truth by truth. The first snow of the next winter came in late November. I was sitting on the same balcony where months earlier I had planted rosemary and written letters, watching the gray sky spill tiny white flakes over the tiled rooftops. The world was quiet, wrapped in white like a blank page waiting for words. I stood there a long time. I didn't shiver. Not like last time. Because this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come back. This time, I wasn't outside looking in. This time, I was inside. Warm, whole, and no longer afraid of what the silence might bring. My life had changed in ways I never thought possible. And it all began the day they left me in the snow. I spent that winter exactly as I pleased. Long walks through the open-air markets with Carmela bundled beside me. Sunday afternoons baking with Bianca, who now called me nearly every night with questions like, "Nana, if someone lies but says they didn't mean it, is it still a lie?" Or, "Why do people love someone and still hurt them?" I answered carefully. Not because I had perfect wisdom, but because I'd lived long enough to know which truths to speak, and which ones to let her discover on her own. Marco wrote letters too. Some short, some pages long. I didn't respond to all of them. Not because I didn't care, but because healing isn't a constant conversation. It's knowing when silence speaks louder. Still, I invited him for Sunday lunches twice that winter. He always brought flowers. He always helped clear the plates. He always asked before taking up space. He was learning. Slowly. Honestly. One Sunday, he brought Bianca and sat quietly while she and I prepared gnocchi together. I watched him from the corner of my eye. The way he smiled at her, the patience in his voice, the way he no longer dominated the room, but supported it. Maybe he hadn't become the boy I raised. But he had become the man who wanted to be better. And that mattered more. On Christmas morning, I opened my door to find a small box resting on the mat. No name. No card. Just a note tucked underneath. For the woman who taught us all how to survive winter. Inside was a locket. Tiny. Simple. Inside it, 2 photos. One of me and Bianca, and one of the rosemary plant on my balcony, blooming under the frost. I knew who it was from. And I didn't need anything more. That night, as candles flickered and the sound of Bianca humming Christmas carols floated from the other room, I sat by my window and whispered a prayer I never thought I'd say again. Thank you. Not for the pain, but for what it revealed. Not for the betrayal, but for the strength it unearthed. Not for the family I lost, but for the one I chose to grow. Because this was the truth. The snow did not bury me. It revealed the roots I'd forgotten were there. The love that couldn't be stolen. The voice I'd silenced for decades. And the power I now held. Not to punish, not to prove, but simply to live on my own terms. So when people ask how I survived what they did to me, how I forgave, how I thrived, how I smiled again, I tell them this. They left me in the snow. But I learned how to build a fire. And now, I am the warmth I always waited for.